Welcome everybody to Gun Talk. My name is Dave. Today we're going to do a quick video on the disassembly of an AR15 lower receiver. Before we begin, make sure your firearm is unloaded and in a safe condition. Please follow all safety protocols while working on your firearm. Now let's start by separating our upper receiver from our lower receiver. Before you begin this, you'll want to make sure your bolt carrier group is forward. If it's back and you begin separating the receivers, that thing's going to slap forward and surprise you. So make sure it's forward. This is our front pivot pin. This is our rear takedown pin. Mine are pretty tight, so I'm just going to take a punch and push them through like that. And now we have the upper separated from the lower. And now we'll begin the disassembly of the lower receiver. To begin our lower receiver disassembly process, we'll start by taking off the buttstock, the buffer tube assembly, and the rear takedown pins. To do this, we just need a couple of tools. We'll need a castle nut wrench, we'll need an AR vise block, and of course we need a vise. Removal of the buttstock is a straightforward process. Each buttstock is going to be slightly different in the mechanism with which to release it. But this is a TI-7, and all I need to do is to press this lever on the back, pull it straight off the buffer tube. Next we're going to want to release the buffer tube and the buffer tube spring, which is inside the buffer tube itself. To do that, we need to depress the buffer tube retaining pin. Let me zoom in on that a little bit so you can see it. Here's the buffer tube retaining pin. So we're going to press that down, which will release the buffer. We'll want to put our finger on it so it doesn't shoot out when we release it. Let's complete the disassembly of the buffer tube assembly from the lower receiver. First thing we'll have to do is remove this castle nut right here using our castle nut wrench. This back plate, what this back plate does is it captures the takedown pin detent, the takedown pin detent spring that sits in this channel right here. And the buffer tube also captures the buffer retainer and the retainer spring that sits below that. So as we do this, we'll have to be careful of those springs so they don't take off on us. So let's start by loosening this castle nut. And we'll back it out to the ends of the threads in the buffer tube. Now this back plate will slide back on the buffer tube. We got to be careful of that spring. It's being a little stubborn. There we go. You can see that spring right there. So I'm going to rotate my buffer tube just slightly clockwise so I can free that spring right there, which we've pulled out. And once we've removed this, we'll take that detent out. Now I'm going to go counterclockwise. I'm going to hold my thumbnail on that retainer so it doesn't shoot up when I loosen this. Okay. Now we can remove our retainer and our retainer spring. Now all we have to do is finish backing out the buffer tube. Now, should be able to just shake loose that detent. There we go. There's the takedown pin detent. And last, we can pull the takedown pin out itself. And that completes the disassembly of the buffer tube assembly. Now we're going to remove our pistol grip and our safety selector. One purpose the pistol grip serves is to retain the safety selector spring and detent that sits in this channel right here. So let's begin unscrewing our pistol grip. While I do this, I'm going to maintain pressure on this grip so it doesn't come loose. While we're unscrewing it, I want to maintain pressure on that spring until we get this screw out. Okay, now I'm going to start taking pressure off the pistol grip. You can see the spring there. Okay, now we can pull that safety selector spring out. Shake out the detent. There's the safety selector detent. Now we can pull the safety selector out. Now let's remove our stock trigger. To do this, we'll need a brass hammer and a 1/8 inch or number 4 brass punch, or AR15 vise block, and of course our vise. First thing we're going to do is we're going to remove tension off the hammer. So we'll hold the hammer with one finger, depress the trigger, and release the disconnect. Take some tension off of that. First we're going to pop out the hammer pin. There's our hammer pin. Now I'm going to pull the punch out and hold on to my hammer. And now we've removed the hammer. Now we'll repeat the same process on the trigger. Pop the trigger pin out. There's the trigger pin. Now we can see it. I'm going to pull this punch out. Now we've released the disconnector, the trigger disconnector. The remainder of the trigger, the disconnector spring, the trigger spring, and now we've completely removed the stock trigger from our lower receiver. Next we're going to remove our front pivot pin. Like our takedown pin, in this channel right here we have a detent and a detent spring holding tension on that pivot pin. To do this job, we're going to need a number 1 or 1/16 inch punch, our AR15 vise block, and of course our vise. So pop that pin out and let me zoom in. So right here is a hole, and what we're going to do is take our punch. We're going to insert it into that hole, and then we're going to rotate that pin to free the detent. So I'm going to push this pin in. I'm going to push that detent back just slightly, and now I'm going to rotate. Now I'm going to pull that pin out. Now I've got to watch for that detent and that spring to pop free on me, so I'm going to kind of hold my finger there. Okay. There's my detent. D10 spring. Now we're going to remove our bolt catch assembly. This is the bolt catch. We've got a roll pin here we're going to knock out. I put a piece of tape here so we don't mar up our finish as we're hammering out this roll pin. Beneath that we have a plunger and a spring. So normally you install the roll pin with a number 3 roll pin punch, but to back it out I'm actually going to use a number 2, and it's not a roll pin punch but just a flat punch. And the reason I'm doing that is this is a slight angle, and that's just going to give me a little wiggle room to get this punch through there. Oop. So there's our bolt catch. You probably missed it, but I dropped the plunger. There it is. It popped out and fell on the floor. And then right there is our bolt catch spring. And then we can maybe take a pair of pliers and pull out the rest of that roll pin. And there's the roll pin. And that completes the disassembly of our bolt catch assembly. Now we're going to remove the magazine catch assembly. This is the button, magazine catch button. When we depress that, that's what releases the magazine from the magazine well. This side is the catch. That's what holds the magazine in place when it's inserted into the magazine well. To remove it, we'll just simply take a tool, and we're going to use a roll pin starter punch, and we're going to depress that button into the receiver until the catch pops out the other side. And now I'm simply going to unscrew it. Okay, I've pulled that out. Now release our button and then the spring. And that completes the disassembly of the magazine catch assembly. The last item we have to remove on our lower receiver is our trigger guard. As you can see, it's attached to 2 points, here and here. This one is a set screw. Notice it doesn't go all the way through. We'll back that out with an Allen wrench. And this is a roll pin. We're going to have to push this one out. Now, one thing we have to be careful of when we remove this one is these dog ears on the back. We can bend that metal if we're not careful. So we're going to have to support that as we remove the roll pin. Let's start by taking out this set screw. Set that to the side. Now, one way to support these dog ears, and they make various jigs for this, but I don't have any, is you can use a pair of pliers to support that. Now will be the hammer. Now should be able to just punch that right out. Careful, tear up my pliers. I've got it most of the way out. Now I can probably just give it a couple taps and we'll be done. There we go. And that completes the removal of our trigger guard. This completes the disassembly of our AR15 lower receiver. To stay organized, I like to put my parts in little baggies. That way I can keep track of things. Following this video, we're going to do another one on the disassembly of the upper receiver. And then following that, we'll do a couple of videos on reassembling everything. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please subscribe to my channel. Have a great day.